It was a fight against myself, in my mind. I mean, a lot of emotions that I couldn't control.
At only 23, Carlos Alcaraz has revealed the uncomfortable truth many tennis fans believed he was hiding. Success made him famous, but it also placed every decision, emotion, and mistake beneath a microscope. Crowds saw the explosive forehands and familiar smile. Meanwhile, the pressure behind them quietly became harder to ignore. Evidently, winning Grand Slams does not include a free escape from expectations. Now, Alcaraz has spoken openly enough to change how his recent struggles must be understood. Why did he remain silent for so long? And what finally convinced him to reveal what was happening? The real explanation could reshape everything people assume about his future. Subscribe if you follow the person behind the player. Then decide, has tennis demanded too much from Alcaraz too soon? The truth was not that Alcaraz had suddenly stopped loving tennis. His admission was more personal and much more dangerous. He feared reaching a point where the sport he had loved since childhood would begin feeling like an obligation. That difference may sound harmless, but it changes everything. A player can repair a weak serve, improve his return position, or rebuild confidence after a defeat. Once passion becomes duty, however, another practice session may only deepen the problem. Alcaraz was describing a battle no ranking table could measure. The fight to remain himself while an entire industry tried to turn his extraordinary gift into a permanent public responsibility. For years, his smile had been treated like another weapon. Commentators praised his energy. Fans copied his celebrations. Tournament organizers placed his face across advertisements because he represented everything tennis wanted to sell: youth, courage, joy, and spectacular shot-making. Yet that joyful image eventually created its own expectation. Every audience wanted the same fearless entertainer. Every interview wanted the cheerful champion. Apparently, becoming famous for happiness means people begin expecting happiness on command. Alcaraz could arrive tired, disappointed, injured, or uncertain, but the public still waited for explosive forehands, impossible defense, clever drop shots, and the familiar grin that made difficult tennis look wonderfully simple. That was why his words carried so much weight. Alcaraz was not merely complaining that professional sport was demanding. Everyone knew that already. He was warning that the demands could slowly change his relationship with the game itself. The warning signs had appeared before he explained them clearly. During difficult matches, frustration sometimes replaced freedom. His choices became rushed. Patience disappeared. A missed forehand produced another reckless attempt, and one bad service game suddenly appeared to follow him through an entire set. Fans called it inconsistency, but his admission suggested that the problem could not always be reduced to tactics, fitness, or one poorly timed decision. After his second-round defeat to Botic van de Zandschulp at the 2024 US Open, Alcaraz delivered one of his most revealing press conferences. He did not blame the court, the balls, the schedule, or his opponent. Instead, he said he felt he had taken steps backward mentally. He admitted that he did not understand why and struggled to control himself when problems arrived. Those were not polished champion phrases created to end an awkward interview. They exposed real confusion. Only weeks earlier, Alcaraz had celebrated major success and appeared mentally stronger than ever. Suddenly, he was describing an internal collapse he could not fully explain. That contrast made the defeat more important than the score. When Alcaraz plays freely, the court seems too small for his imagination. He can defend several feet behind the baseline, sprint forward for a drop shot, then turn the next neutral ball into a violent winner. Opponents cannot simply predict direction, they must predict which version of tennis he will invent. Under pressure, however, those choices can become arguments between instinct and discipline. Creativity turns into impatience. Courage becomes unnecessary risk. The same imagination that makes him brilliant can leave him reaching for a miracle when the rally only requires one sensible ball. None of that made him weak. It made him young. Unfortunately, tennis allowed him almost no space to develop privately. Alcaraz became the youngest man to reach world number one after winning the 2022 US Open. From that moment, ordinary growing pains became international debates. One defeat raised questions about discipline. One emotional outburst became evidence of a mental flaw. A holiday invited accusations that he lacked commitment. Somehow, strangers who had never survived a professional practice session became fully qualified experts on how he should organize every hour. Early success did not buy patience. It removed it because audiences immediately began measuring him against finished legends. Alcaraz had openly discussed wanting to sit at the same table as Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. That ambition sounded thrilling, but it carried a hidden price. Those champions did not build their records through talent alone. They spent decades controlling schedules, bodies, diets, recovery, travel, and emotion. Their achievements represented thousands of sacrifices the audience never witnessed. Alcaraz wanted historic trophies, yet he also wanted a recognizable life beyond tennis. The uncomfortable question was whether modern greatness would permit both. His talent promised extraordinary opportunity, while the sport quietly presented a bill for every opportunity it provided. The documentary Carlos Alcaraz, My Way, finally placed that tension in full view. It showed a young champion trying to balance enormous ambition with the need to enjoy his own life. Members of his team understood his potential and knew talent alone could not produce a long career. Their answer was discipline. Alcaraz understood the argument, but he believed time with friends, family, and familiar surroundings helped preserve the energy required to compete. Neither side was discussing something trivial. His team feared wasted potential. Alcaraz feared losing the person whose passion created that potential. Tennis had produced a surprisingly cruel choice: protect the champion or protect Carlos. But here is the detail most people still get wrong about his revelation. Alcaraz was not asking for permission to avoid hard work. He was warning that work without freedom could destroy his motivation to continue working. That distinction changes the entire story. Critics often present the debate as discipline against fun. Either Alcaraz lives like a machine devoted entirely to tennis, or he becomes a talented entertainer who fails to fulfill his promise. Real life is not that clean. His achievements already proved discipline. Major championships across different surfaces do not arrive because someone enjoys hitting drop shots. They require years of training, recovery, tactical study, physical pain, and emotional control. The argument was never whether Alcaraz worked. It was how much more the sport could take before his commitment stopped feeling voluntary and began resembling a sentence he was expected to serve. Alcaraz had already spoken about mental tiredness. Near the end of the 2024 season, he admitted that the year had been demanding and that players could not remain fresh forever. His statement challenged a convenient belief. Because elite athletes are wealthy and famous, exhaustion should somehow become optional. Money can provide excellent doctors, trainers, and hotels. It cannot add another month to the calendar. Fame can make travel comfortable. It cannot make constant travel normal. Trophies can prove sacrifice worked once. They cannot prove that the same level of sacrifice should continue endlessly without damaging the person making it. The smile made his warnings easier to dismiss. Alcaraz often spoke with humor, even when discussing uncomfortable subjects. Some observers saw the grin and assumed the problem could not be serious. Yet smiling while describing pressure does not erase pressure. Humor can be protection. It allows an athlete to tell the truth without turning every answer into a medical investigation or a week of dramatic headlines. Alcaraz may understand that danger better than most. His personality is a commercial asset. Sponsors value his warmth, broadcasters promote his excitement, and tournaments sell his joy. Admitting that joy feels threatened risks disturbing an image worth millions. That helps explain why he remained quiet. There was no single secret event to expose and no obvious villain to blame. His coaches wanted him to succeed. His family wanted him protected. Fans wanted to watch him. Sponsors wanted access, while tournaments wanted their champion. Each demand appeared reasonable when considered alone. Together they became heavy. Talent created opportunity. Opportunity created responsibility. Responsibility created routine. Routine threatened freedom. Alcaraz needed time to recognize that chain before he could explain it without unfairly accusing the people closest to him. Silence was not necessarily deception. It was a young man searching for language strong enough to describe a complicated problem. The relationship with Juan Carlos Ferrero sat at the center of that problem. Ferrero knew elite tennis from personal experience. He had reached world number 1 and won the French Open, so his lessons about sacrifice did not come from a motivational poster. He helped turn Alcaraz from a gifted teenager into a major champion. Their partnership was built through years of trust, correction, disagreement, and success. That history made their differences meaningful, but it did not automatically make them signs of betrayal. A coach must think about a player's ceiling. The player must decide whether reaching that ceiling leaves enough room to breathe. Ferrero's responsibility was to push Alcaraz when comfort threatened progress. Alcaraz's responsibility was to recognize when pushing no longer helped. Finding that boundary became harder as fame expanded. Before global success, a short holiday was simply rest. After major victories, every photograph became evidence. If Alcaraz attended a celebration, critics questioned his priorities. If he later lost, the celebration returned as Exhibit A in a trial nobody had formally opened. Tennis culture celebrates teenagers for defeating adults, then acts surprised when those teenagers still want parts of an ordinary young life. Alcaraz experienced that contradiction before he had time to understand it. Meanwhile, his rivals continued improving. Jannik Sinner developed greater consistency and became the calm alternative in endless comparisons. Djokovic remained the standard for mental discipline and career management. Every emerging opponent viewed Alcaraz as a champion to study and a target to attack. Therefore, he was never judged only against his own progress. His schedule was compared with Sinner's. His emotional reactions were measured against Djokovic's control. His personality was compared with Nadal's discipline. Apparently, even personal identity must now defend ranking points. Yet different champions need different conditions, and copying another player perfectly could remove the qualities that made Alcaraz exceptional. Sinner often appears controlled, direct, and efficient. Alcaraz appears spontaneous, emotional, and inventive. One builds pressure through clean repetition. The other can destroy a rally's logic in seconds. Their contrast gives the rivalry its power, but it also proves why Alcaraz should not be managed as if he were Sinner. Djokovic found strength through intense control and problem-solving. Nadal relied on routines and competitive suffering. Federer's relaxed appearance rested on enormous preparation. Alcaraz must create a sustainable version of himself rather than performing an imitation of somebody else's greatness. Championship habits are not uniforms available in one standard size. That is why protecting joy can be understood as career strategy rather than an excuse. Alcaraz's best tennis depends on freedom. When he feels confident, he improvises. Successful improvisation creates more confidence and the entire court opens. Pressure can reverse that cycle. One poor decision produces frustration. Frustration tightens his movement and judgment. Tight choices create further mistakes. Suddenly, the player who makes impossible shots look easy begins making routine rallies appear exhausting. More technical training may not solve that pattern if the deeper problem is emotional overload. Sometimes another hour on court sharpens a weapon. Sometimes it merely increases the weight attached to it. The difficult part is defining balance. Too much freedom can damage preparation. Too much control can destroy motivation. Rest can protect the body, but excessive rest can remove rhythm. A coach must push, yet pushing at the wrong moment can deepen exhaustion. Alcaraz has to locate the changing line between those outcomes while millions of people criticize from outside. The correct answer in January may become useless by August. A long clay court run changes what the body needs. A painful defeat changes what the mind needs. No fixed formula can manage. Every stage of a season, which makes communication inside his team more important than blind obedience. Alcaraz has already shown that he can recover from difficult stretches. Painful defeats have often been followed by great victories. That proves resilience, but it creates another unfair expectation. People begin assuming he will always respond dramatically. Whenever his level falls, viewers wait for the heroic comeback. When his body struggles, attention moves immediately toward the next major. If he admits fatigue, the calendar continues as if honesty itself were a recovery treatment. No player can produce endless answers without eventually needing time to understand the questions. Resilience should not become another excuse for the sport to ignore warning signs. Now comes the question tennis should fear most. What happens if its brightest young entertainer starts protecting himself from the machine built to celebrate him? That approach will not make every decision correct. Alcaraz could rest and still lose. He may prepare carefully and suffer another injury. He can feel happy and play badly because tennis does not reward sensible life choices with automatic victories. However, the purpose of balance is not to remove defeat. It is to ensure defeat does not destroy the desire to return. His career will never follow a smooth upward line. Opponents improve, bodies change, confidence moves, and personal priorities develop. Early success created the illusion that every year must bring more control and more trophies. Real careers rarely cooperate with such tidy expectations. His honesty provides one important advantage. Naming a fear makes it easier to manage. If Alcaraz fears tennis becoming an obligation, his team can watch for the conditions that create that feeling. They can adjust training, protect recovery, and separate necessary discipline from routines maintained only because older champions followed them. Most importantly, he can speak before frustration becomes resentment. Athletes often become quieter when pressure grows because they fear appearing weak or ungrateful. Alcaraz challenged that habit by admitting confusion after defeat. Honesty did not immediately solve the issue, but it replaced a false answer with a useful question. Fans carry responsibility as well. Support should not disappear when a champion stops entertaining perfectly. If audiences celebrate honesty only when it appears beside a trophy, they do not truly want honesty. They want a victory speech with extra emotion. Alcaraz's difficult moments deserve careful attention because they reveal the same developing person responsible for the great ones. The player who loses control during one match is not separate from the player who produces an astonishing comeback. Both versions belong to a young champion learning to carry extraordinary ability. Treating every setback as a character verdict only adds pressure to a problem created partly by pressure. Comparisons with the big three make that judgment worse. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic are viewed through completed or nearly completed stories. Their difficult periods already sit inside legendary careers. Alcaraz is still writing his. Every setback appears enormous because nobody knows what follows. A season of doubt could begin a decline, or it could teach the lesson that protects another decade. Nobody can know. What can be judged is his willingness to examine the issue. He has discussed mental fatigue, emotional control, pressure, and enjoyment openly. Those admissions do not prove he has stopped loving tennis. They prove he wants to preserve that love. Careful language matters here. His statements do not give strangers permission to diagnose him from television footage. Concern is not diagnosis. Exhaustion is not defeat. A difficult month is not a finished career. Dramatic rumors can create the same pressure they pretend to explain. Once speculation begins, every expression becomes evidence. A quiet practice becomes a crisis. A withdrawal becomes proof of a secret. Alcaraz's genuine statement is serious enough without turning it into something he never claimed. His fear concerned obligation and lost joy. Respecting his honesty means discussing those words directly rather than attaching a convenient medical label to them. The tactical stakes are also real. Alcaraz's creativity depends heavily on confidence. His drop shot succeeds because opponents fear his forehand. His power becomes more dangerous because he can suddenly move forward. His defense matters because one desperate retrieval can become an attack. Hesitation weakens every link. A cautious Alcaraz can still win, but a free Alcaraz can change a match within minutes. Protecting mental freedom therefore affects far more than his private happiness. It shapes tactics, results, rivalries, tournament draws, and the future of men's tennis. The human concern and competitive concern are not opponents. In his case, they are directly connected. Sinner's presence makes those stakes sharper. Their rivalry could define an era, but rivalries require both players to remain healthy and motivated. If Alcaraz burns himself out while trying to satisfy every expectation, tennis loses years of possible matches between two contrasting champions. That does not mean he should be protected from competition. It means his team should protect the conditions allowing him to compete at his best. Rivalries are not produced by promotional posters alone. They grow through repeated battles, adaptation, recovery, and renewed desire. A rivalry cannot flourish if one participant begins viewing the entire journey as compulsory labor. Injury adds another layer because time away from matches does not remove pressure. Recovery produces uncertainty. Every training video creates questions about a return date. Every delay invites theories. Once a star returns, patience disappears immediately. The opening match becomes an examination, One difficult set becomes a warning, and the first defeat becomes a verdict. Yet a body can be medically ready before instincts are competitively sharp. Alcaraz may need uneven performances to regain timing and trust. Expecting perfection immediately could push him toward proving too much too soon, especially when his natural response to problems is aggressive action rather than quiet patience. The larger danger is the endless race surrounding him. He races Sinner in rankings, Djokovic in historical discussion, his own records in every new season, and a public timetable that demands greatness immediately. None of those races has a reasonable finish line. Win one major and attention turns toward the next. Reach number one and people ask how long it can last. Defeat a rival and the rematch becomes essential. Success does not reduce expectation. It feeds expectation until talent begins to resemble a debt. Alcaraz is expected to repay that debt through trophies, entertainment, availability, and a smile maintained throughout the entire transaction. No athlete can satisfy that equation forever. Alcaraz's future may depend on accepting that he does not need to. He can chase history without allowing strangers to define the only acceptable version of history. Perhaps he will approach the records of the Big Three. Injuries, rivals, or changing priorities may prevent it. Neither outcome can be decided at 23. A career is not a prediction contest for impatient spectators. It is a long collection of choices made under changing conditions. The most important current choice may not concern a tournament. It may concern what kind of life can safely support his ambition. If he chooses only comfort, his potential could suffer. If he chooses only sacrifice, his identity could suffer. The correct path lies somewhere between them. Finding it requires honesty from Alcaraz and flexibility from his team. Coaches must challenge him without treating happiness like weakness. Alcaraz must defend his independence without turning freedom into avoidance. Disagreements will happen, but disagreement inside a successful team does not automatically prove collapse. Sometimes it shows that difficult questions are finally being discussed. The true danger begins when either side stops listening and every decision becomes a contest over control rather than an effort to protect the same career. Tennis organizations should listen too. Players have repeatedly warned about the calendar's physical and mental demands. Those complaints cannot be dismissed simply because stars earn large amounts of money. Elite tennis depends on individuals rather than interchangeable teams. If a leading player cannot compete, another employee cannot fill his shift without changing the product. Player health protects rivalries, ticket sales, broadcasts, and careers. Yet every event has financial interests, so each week demands importance. The sport wants longer seasons, more premium tournaments, dependable stars, and healthier athletes simultaneously. Even Alcaraz cannot chase four balls headed toward opposite corners. His openness also gives younger players permission to acknowledge that ambition and exhaustion can exist together. A competitor may love tennis and still need distance from it. Someone can appreciate success while disliking what success demands. Previous generations often hid such conflicts because vulnerability was interpreted as weakness. Modern players increasingly discuss burnout, online abuse, anxiety, and constant travel. Alcaraz's voice carries unusual weight because he appears to possess everything: youth, talent, trophies, popularity, family support, and enormous commercial value. If that player fears losing joy, the warning cannot be dismissed as bitterness from somebody who failed. Success intensified his test. So why did Alcaraz remain silent? Because admitting pressure is difficult when the world has already decided that you are living its dream. Why did he finally speak? Because protecting that dream required identifying what could destroy it. Alcaraz did not reveal one hidden enemy. He revealed the cost of becoming Carlos Alcaraz. His name opened doors but created expectations. Trophies brought freedom but created obligations. His smile connected him with fans but became something they expected him to wear. Now he must separate the person from the performance before they become impossible to distinguish. Champions cannot eliminate pressure. They must learn which forms improve them and which slowly empty them. Competitive pressure can sharpen focus. Historical pressure can distort it. Team standards create discipline. Constant control creates resentment. Crowd energy inspires, while public ownership can suffocate. Boundaries will become essential. Alcaraz may skip events, refuse commitments, or choose recovery when audiences demand another show. Criticism will follow because boundaries disappoint people who benefited from having none. Still, one unpopular decision can protect years of competition. The true result will not be visible immediately. It will appear later if Alcaraz remains motivated, healthy, and capable of enjoying the court. If the joy disappears, these warnings will look painfully clear in hindsight. For now, hope remains because he has not spoken like someone finished with tennis. He continues chasing enormous goals, and his fear exists precisely because the sport matters deeply. People do not fear losing something they no longer value. That may be the most reassuring part of his truth. Alcaraz wants to protect his love for tennis because he plans to keep using it. He is not closing the door. He is trying to stop success from locking him inside. At 23, he does not need every answer, but he needs space to discover them. Tennis must decide whether it can provide that space or continue treating his youth like an unlimited resource. Fans must decide whether they care only about the champion he might become or also about the person required to become him. Greatness matters to Alcaraz. Happiness matters too. One should not automatically demand the destruction of the other. Perhaps that belief will prevent him from matching every historic record. Alternatively, it may be the reason he remains long enough to challenge them. His revelation does not explain only one defeat or one difficult season. It exposes the private negotiation likely to shape his entire career. Carlos Alcaraz is fighting for trophies, ranking points, and a place in history. More importantly, he is fighting to ensure that winning still feels like his decision rather than an obligation imposed by everyone watching. Drop the word balance in the comments if Alcaraz should protect his happiness before chasing every record. Then decide whether his honesty reveals dangerous doubt or the maturity required for a long career. If the person behind the player matters to you, subscribe. We cover the struggles, decisions, and pressure that the scoreboard cannot explain.